Mr Hanson, it's a great pleasure to follow my honourable friend who gave a typically thoughtful and forensic speech, and I'll try to cheer him up even more during the course of my remarks if I possibly can. Now, Mr Hanson, on a day when there are no less than 7 players in the England squad who are playing at Ellen Road tonight in their last match before the World Cup who were born in Yorkshire, I intend to try and give a perspective from God's own county. But I will not be able to do it nearly as well, I don't think, as the Right Honourable Lady from Putney did. She may have left, I think, Rotherham a while ago, but she retains a love of the north of England, of Yorkshire, and a real passion. And if I may say so, the Honourable Gentleman for Windsor, he spoke with such knowledge of the north of England and spoke indeed for the nation that by the powers invested in me, I make him an honorary Yorkshireman for the day. Now, Mr Hanson, I too, like many honourable members in the House this afternoon, praise the Select Committee report for its thoroughness and so on. But just as the Select Committee Chair, Mr Hanson, inserted a small caveat, a small few buts on that, in her remarks, I have a little but in that praise as well, because reading the Select Committee report was like, Mr Hanson, for me, watching a 12-round boxing match. You know, each round came and went, and you thought there was only one boxer in it. And it was the same thing, reading through all the criticisms of the Heathrow case in the 150 pages, include appendices in the Select Committee report. So I was rather surprised. It was like watching all 12 rounds. There was only one possible verdict. And then the bout went to the other side, Mr Hanson, the other boxer. And I really did feel that all the evidence in the Select Committee report led to one conclusion, and that was to be on the precautionary principle, at the very least, to say no to Heathrow. And I want particularly, Mr Hanson, to address one member of the Chamber today. That is the third speech we look forward to from Yorkshire, a Yorkshire-born member today, Mr Hanson. That, of course, is on our front bench, my honourable friend from Hull. And I want to look at some of the impact on the Heathrow announcement on Humberside Airport as well, because I'm hoping that either now or very soon we will hear from our Labour Transport front bench that they're going to follow the lead of our leader over many years, of our Shadow Chancellor, who have been in strong opposition to the expansion of Heathrow. I can remember one stage there were lonely voices, but I hope we will resist. There's this gentleman called Len McCluskey, I think, and he's putting a little bit of pressure, I think, on our two our leaders. But I very much hope, particularly given all the criticisms we've heard from the Conservative benches of crony capitalism and so on and things, that our Shadow Transport team, before very long, will be putting that 3-line whip on the Labour Party to go through the lobbies and oppose this proposal. I'll be very proud on this occasion to be in with the government lobbies, within the opposition lobbies rather, on that occasion. Now, I just want to concentrate my remarks on the regional connectivity and the economies of the north of England, because I think that's what I'm best able to do. And we've heard a lot about that already, and I will not repeat it, but I would just express some doubts, Mr Hanson, about the promises that we've heard and which have been examined about connectivity. As I understand it, the promise is up to 15%. Up to 15%. I'm not sure there is a floor on that. You know, could it be 7%, or could it be 2%, or could it be 11%? If the minister has a floor, I'd be glad to hear it. I'd also be very interested to have published the legal advice from the government, which indicates that it would be legal to subsidise airport-to-airport connections. Because it's not clear, as various honourable members have mentioned, that it would in fact be legal. And listening to Baroness Sugg in the other place yesterday, she made clear, as I think ministers have done, that most of these flights, these regional connectivity, is expected to be on a commercial basis. And my local airport is Leeds Bradford, engine of the Northern Powerhouse. And if you can't make flights to Heathrow commercial from Leeds Bradford, where can you make them from commercial from? And yet, over the last 20, 25 years, Mr Hanson, it's been a continual story. Someone has a route to Heathrow for a few months or years, and then it's cut. BMI cuts routes between Heathrow and the north was the headline about 10 years ago. Just a few months ago, Leeds Bradford Airport disappointed as British Airways announces flight cuts to and from Heathrow, halving the number of flights. So it'd be very, very good to hear from ministers, either now or at a future occasion, which airports they think there is a commercial case for to run more slots into Heathrow. And the truth is, Mr Hanson, that for the north of England, and I think this is true from Scotland, I try and follow Scottish politics as well, and there's an awful lot of talk about connections with the Baltic states and with the Low Countries and so on things. For us in Yorkshire, the main business connection, if you want to go to a hub, we prefer to go point to point, but the main business connection is to Amsterdam. And that is true, I think, particularly, and I look to my honourable friend on the front bench as well from Humberside, as it is from Leeds Bradford, because you have frequent flights there, whereas from Leeds Bradford it's going to be down to one a day at the moment. But the point-to-point is what we want in the Northern Powerhouse, really. We don't want to be reliant on changing at other airports if we can. And there was the extremely important, I think, sentence which the Chair of the Select Committee drew attention to in the report, page 26. While direct international connectivity from the regions will continue to grow in any eventuality, and I acknowledge that, the DFT's forecast show that direct international connectivity from the regions would be lower with the NWR Northwest Runway than without expansion. And it's lower by a big factor. It's lower by there would be 74,000 fewer direct international flights per year to and from airports in the non-London regions in 2030. That's about 10%, I think, of the total. And it increases then to 161,000 fewer flights from areas outside London in 2050. And I think that is remarkable, really. And how any Northern MP can vote for that, I'm not sure. And if you look, and I commend to my honourable friend on the front bench, the Select Committee have, and these are all based on government figures, by the way, it's not the Select Committee's imagining, it is churning the government figures. They have broken it down now, and I don't know whether the Select Committee chair could do the House a favour and put these figures in the library of the House, as they say. I don't know how you do that, but I'm sure the Select Committee chair has power, like ministers, to do that. And the Select Committee have broken it down into individual airports. And I won't read through all the airports, but just to give a couple of examples, Mr Hanson. For example, Birmingham, without expansion of Heathrow, would have 124,000 flights roughly in 2030. That's international flights. It's down to 107,000 in 2030 if Heathrow expands. In Leeds Bradford, it's 39,000 without, 35,000 roughly if Heathrow expands over the same time period. In Manchester, 179,000 if Heathrow doesn't expand, 159,000, 20,000 fewer international flights from Manchester by 2030. And in Glasgow, if you project right through till 2060, there still would be less flights, 64,970 without Heathrow, 62,874 with Heathrow. So the impact is throughout the United Kingdom, this chilling factor. And as the Honourable Member for Windsor said, we're going to have lots of legal uncertainty. It's going to put a mocker on the growth plans of all these airports around the country. And I would call on the airports of Birmingham, Manchester, all the great airports, to stand up and be counted. When you talk to them privately, I think the Department of Transport has had a word with some of them, really. They've pointed out that they're hoping for extra rail links and so on, and a period of silence would be appreciated, I think, is the message that you get when you ask them privately. So Paul Kehoe, who was Birmingham's chief executive, is now gone. He was very vocal about the case for Birmingham, particularly if we get high-speed rail there. Birmingham is as closer with high-speed rail than Stansted would be to London. Equally, Manchester have gone rather suspiciously quiet, Mr Hanson, in recent times. So I think it's called upon for the political representatives of those great cities. I would hope the Mayor of Manchester, the Mayor of Birmingham would lead the clamour against the expansion of Heathrow in the interests of the regional economies. I have high hopes of the SNP, Mr Hanson. I don't think it is yet fixed. I think the SNP are thoughtfully thinking about this, whether they truly see themselves going into the lobbies with some Conservatives, rather than joining what I hope will be the Labour Party, the Greens, and what does it say for the green credentials of anybody who goes through, I know it's the environment of London, but it's important to us all in the United Kingdom, and I really hope the SNP will reflect on this. Of course I will give way.
See, I know they're all for Scottish independence, but what I'm worried about is that they'll get it through losing every single flight out of the country. And I'm not sure if that's the kind of independence that Scotland really wants. And I would have thought the SNP would be better off seizing the opportunity to genuinely develop a Scottish airport strategy. And I know one of the other CEOs who runs an airport that's concerned about Heathrow expansion is the CEO of Edinburgh Airport.
Mr Hanson, it would almost be that myself and my fellow Yorkshire-born member of the House had cooperated, because I have a quote to end, Mr Hanson, from the said gentleman, Gordon Dewar, who said, and admittedly Edinburgh has associations with Gatwick, who have also gone suspiciously quiet in recent months, Mr Hanson. I don't know quite how they've been silenced, but they have. But Gordon Dewar hasn't been silenced. He is speaking for Scotland and for the United Kingdom. He says Heathrow expansion risks a monopolised market, which is bad for passengers. Yeah. He argues, Mr Hanson, that Scottish airports are now less dependent on London than ever before, and that our passengers tell us they want to fly directly. So, Mr Hanson, I have very high hopes of my honourable friend, the member from Hull, that he will lead us, despite Mr Len McCluskey, into the lobbies against the government.